Every human being has a limit, even those who grew up learning to swallow hard. Monica's came on her own wedding day. It was a date that should have symbolized a silent acknowledgement of her mother, Pam's, a sacrifice she had made. A woman who had raised her daughter alone, working as a hairdresser in a small makeshift salon, amidst endless shifts and aching legs. Monica thought seeing her enter that lavish ceremony, decorated with flowers brought in from abroad and surrounded by cameras, would be the highlight of their lives. But what was coming wasn't a celebration. It was an ambush disguised as elegance. It all started with whispers, glances that weren't hidden, suppressed laughter that wasn't so suppressed. Adam's mother, Deborah, was whispering to a cousin as Pam walked by in her simple but dignified navy blue dress, lovingly chosen by Monica and bought with the money from her first prize as an architect. Deborah scanned her from head to toe and said, in a low but audible voice, "It looks like it came from a second-hand fair. Very authentic." The cousin burst out laughing. Monica heard it. She didn't react. She pretended it wasn't with her. She swallowed and continued. But that was only the beginning of a wound that was about to open up completely. The room was packed. 204 guests, most of them business people, executives, and figures from the real estate world. People who spoke with numbers on their tongues and surnames like trophies. Pam was seated at a side table, far from the center, almost as if she'd been placed there out of obligation. Not for lack of space, there was plenty of room, but by a clear and cruel decision. Monica didn't miss that detail, but at that moment, she was still trying to maintain her composure. Every step, every glance, every forced smile became more burdensome. The photographers passed right in front of her mother, as if she didn't exist. And when someone from Adam's family approached, it was with feigned kindness, with short sentences, and tight smiles. During the speeches, Adam's father, Ronald, took the microphone, glass in hand, his posture as if he owned the world. He spoke of the pride of seeing his son join a brilliant young woman, but tempered it with comments like, "We know that humble roots also build character," or "It's admirable how someone can rise from such a low place and make it this far." The room laughed knowingly. Some applauded. Monica felt the floor shake. Her mother looked down, clasping her hands in her lap. It was the most elegant way they could find to humiliate her, disguising contempt as flattery. In that instant, something inside Monica broke. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just looked at Adam, who was laughing with the others. That's when Monica understood that it wasn't just a lack of respect. It was a deep-rooted collective stance, sustained by a structure that feigned acceptance while tightening the screws of contempt. It wasn't just Deborah or Ronald. It was also the friends, the associates, the relatives, who observed her with that mixture of fascination and superiority, as if she were a curious exception, a kind of exotic achievement that Adam had rescued from the periphery. At the head table, an aunt of the groom murmured in an amused tone that Pam looked like a lady who makes change at the bakery. Muffled laughter reached Monica's ears, and Adam again said nothing, as if it weren't worth it. Monica didn't react immediately. She finished the toast, smiled mechanically for the photos, walked elegantly through the room, and greeted the guests. But inside, something was gathering. It wasn't uncontrolled rage. It was a sharp certainty. Instead of making a scene, she chose silence. That same silence she learned from her mother, who never argued in public, but always knew what she was doing. As she slowly approached her mother, who was still trying to hide her discomfort, Monica made a decision, and she would do it that very day. Because if she allowed that kind of violence to go unnoticed at her wedding, when would she not allow it? She approached Pam and quietly asked her to accompany her to the side garden. The sun was already beginning to set, and the living room lights were coming on one by one. They walked in silence, but Monica didn't let go of her mother's hand. When they reached a more secluded corner, she looked her mother straight in the eyes and said, "You don't deserve this. Neither of us deserves it." Pam tried to smile, but her eyes were already filling with tears. "Daughter, don't worry. It's just the way she is. Don't give it a second thought." But Monica couldn't accept that phrase. Precisely because she'd heard it all her life. "It's the way she is," had served as an excuse for too long to hide systematic contempt. Back in the hall, Monica asked for the microphone with the same casualness with which she had greeted the guests. Some applauded, expecting another thank you speech. But she didn't smile. She didn't mention the flowers, the catering, or the decorations. She simply said, "Thank you for coming, but this celebration will not continue." Silence fell immediately. Deborah opened her eyes in surprise. Ronald tried to get up from his chair, and Adam let out an awkward laugh, believing it was a joke. "I'm not going to marry someone who laughs while my mother is humiliated. I'm not a social trophy, and she's not an embarrassment." Her voice was firm, without shouting. Her serenity hurt more than any scandal. For a few seconds, no one knew how to react. Some guests lowered their gaze, others pretended to check their cell phones, and some took the opportunity to discreetly leave the room. Adam stood up from the head table, still confused, and approached Monica with a mixture of embarrassment and arrogance on his face. He tried to take her arm, but she stepped back. There was no fuss, no shouting, no movie drama, just a firm woman saying enough. "You knew," she said, "and you did." "Nothing." He tried to justify himself, but his words were lost in the murmurs. Monica didn't let him continue. She walked to her mother and, without looking back, asked her to come with her. The wedding was over, but the day wasn't. An hour later, in a private room at the hotel, Monica signed documents she had prepared weeks earlier. It wasn't an impulsive decision. She had spent months gathering information, consulting with lawyers, and strategically buying stock. She knew that Adam's last name brought power, but she also knew that true power lay in understanding how the system worked and learning how to navigate within it. With her final signature, she officially became the majority shareholder of Adam's family business. That company, which so many used as a symbol of superiority, now had a new face at the helm. And that face was that of the daughter of a local hairdresser. The next day, the atmosphere at the company's headquarters was one of total confusion. The news had spread. Quickly, Monica Castro, the fiancé who canceled her wedding in the middle of the event, was now the majority owner of the real estate company that had been controlled by the Delacroix family for years. Some thought it was a revenge move, but that wasn't it. Monica didn't want emotional revenge. She wanted to break the logic that allowed families like Adam's to believe the world belonged to them by birthright. The first thing she did was call for an internal audit. The second was to open the door to an independent investigation team. And the third was to remove Ronald from his management duties. Deborah tried to call her several times that week, not to apologize, but to negotiate. But Monica didn't answer. She knew all they were looking for was to retain some power, to save face. Meanwhile, the media began to take an interest in the story, although she never gave interviews. She wasn't interested in being in the spotlight. Everything she needed to say, she would do so with facts. In less than 3 weeks, she publicly presented a report revealing accounting irregularities, tax evasion, and bid rigging by the former administration. The report didn't mention names, but everyone knew who she was referring to. It was a silent earthquake. The kind that doesn't shout, but brings down entire structures. As the scandal grew in business circles, Monica maintained her routine. She arrived at the office early, reviewed contracts, and listened to employees who had never been considered before. She implemented an internal integrity policy that prioritized transparency and fairness, something that sounded almost revolutionary within such an old-fashioned structure. Many thought it wouldn't last, that a young woman without the right last name wouldn't withstand the weight of the system. But Monica didn't just endure, she thrived. What no one knew was that her mettle didn't come from an MBA from a prestigious university, but from years of watching her mother get up at 5 in the morning, suffering from migraines and leg pain, to make sure nothing was missed. The press began to shift its focus. They no longer talked about the architect who broke up with her millionaire boyfriend, but about the new executive who was transforming the business model from within. Some old investors withdrew in fear, but new ones came, interested in the modern, humane, and profitable vision Monica offered. Instead of hiding her origins, she made them a banner. She showed that the streets where she grew up could also teach valuable lessons about strategy, dignity, and resilience. In every interview she turned down, she reaffirmed her message. It wasn't about her, but about what she was building with her decisions. Her last name didn't make her. Her actions did. By the time the legal proceedings against Ronald formally began, Monica had already made her position clear. This wasn't about revenge, but about responsibility. She didn't intervene in the legal decisions, but she submitted all the necessary documentation and cooperated with the relevant agencies. It was a hard blow for the Delacroix family, accustomed to resolving everything with phone calls and favors. The trial was covered by the media, but Monica didn't attend. She was busy inaugurating the first headquarters of the Pam Castro Foundation in a renovated old building in the heart of a forgotten neighborhood. She had quietly purchased it months before, long before the scandal, with the intention of creating an educational space for girls from vulnerable communities. The opening day was simple but full of meaning. No magazine photographers or invited influencers. Just locals, Pam's former students, collaborators from the salon where her mother worked for years, and several girls accompanied by their mothers. Pam cut the ribbon with tears in her eyes, dressed in a simple outfit, without makeup, but with a dignity that was palpable in the air. She didn't say much. She just hugged Monica, tightly. That image didn't make the front pages, but it was the one that stayed with everyone who was there. For Monica, that was the true yes. Not the one she didn't say at the altar, but the one she pronounced with actions. Yes to her story. Yes to her origins. Yes to everything they once tried to make her feel she had to hide. The following months were an intense mix of work, media exposure, and necessary silences. Monica decided not to speak publicly about the wedding episode, even though everyone wanted that story. What she preferred to show was the result. More than 30 girls enrolled in the first mentoring programs, community architecture workshops, leadership courses for teens, and a technical team composed mostly of women who also came from difficult backgrounds. Pam still went to the salon some days, but now she also helped out at the foundation, teaching basic skills in aesthetics, personal care, and customer service. She never sought to be the center of attention, but her presence sustained the place like a firm pillar. Adam, for his part, tried to get closer. He sent flowers, long emails, and messages through third parties. He said he'd realized it too late, that he felt ashamed, that his parents had pressured him, that everything had gotten out of hand. Monica read everything, but didn't respond. Not out of hatred, but because there was no longer any room for that. She understood that he too was a victim of his environment, but that didn't excuse him from having had a choice. And he chose to laugh. He chose to remain silent. Sometimes love doesn't die from a lack of feeling, but from an excess of clarity. And that clarity had reached Monica in the most brutal and definitive way, in front of an entire room that laughed while her mother was treated like a joke. A year after that day, Monica was invited to receive an award for her urban renewal project, the same one she had begun as a volunteer when she was still a student. In her speech, she mentioned Pam and the value of untold stories. She didn't mention Adam or the wedding or the Delacroix name. There was no need to. What was truly important had already been said by every girl who entered the foundation fearfully and left with projects in hand, by every woman who dared to dream of opening her own business, by every decision made without asking anyone's permission. That was her response. Silent, but powerful. Pam was still the same unassuming woman, with her thermos of coffee and her same old habits. Sometimes she didn't understand why people stopped her on the street to thank her or ask for a photo. "I didn't do anything," she said. But Monica knew she'd done everything. She was the one who held her up every time she fell, the one who pushed her to study when there wasn't even money for transportation, the one who sold her wedding ring to pay for her tuition. That invisible inheritance was what shaped her. It was never about revenge on an arrogant family, but rather about restoring value to what the world had tried to minimize, to her origins, to her mother, to herself. On one of those quiet days at the Foundation's headquarters, Monica received a handwritten letter. It was from a young woman who had participated in one of the workshops, and she told how, thanks to what she had learned there, she had been able to design and execute a small gardening project in her neighborhood. She said that for the first time, someone had listened to her without correcting her, without looking down on her clothes or accent. Monica read it silently, sitting at the desk where her mother used to organize haircuts with a spiral notebook. She smiled, because she understood that the true impact wasn't in the headlines or the press releases, but in those invisible moments when a life feels validated. That day, after closing the office, Monica walked alone to the bus stop, just like she had years ago when she was in college and had to stretch every penny. She didn't do it out of nostalgia, but because she needed to remind herself that nothing was guaranteed, that everything she had was still a daily construction. As the sun fell behind the buildings, she took a photo with her cell phone and sent it to Pam with a short message. "We continue." Her mother responded with a heart emoji. Nothing more was needed. Between them, love and respect didn't need speeches. They had already said everything, without shouting, without showing off. Just living with dignity, even when the world turned its back on them. Shortly after, a conference was organized on women leaders in sectors dominated by traditional family structures. Monica was invited to speak about her experience as an architect, entrepreneur, and founder. At first, she hesitated to accept. She didn't like the spotlight, nor the label of inspiring story. But she ended up going, because she understood that her silence could also reinforce the very system that once kept her out. In her speech, she didn't mention numbers or positions. She talked about her mother, about the time they couldn't pay the electricity bill, about when she almost dropped out of college because she didn't have enough to photocopy the floor plan. And she also spoke about elegant violence, the kind that comes disguised as a compliment and hurts more than a direct insult. The audience fell silent at the end. There was no immediate ovation, but rather a moment of collective containment, as if each person present needed to process what they had heard. Monica didn't cry, nor did she smile. She left the stage and went straight home. When she arrived, she found Pam watering the plants in the small garden they had planted together years before. They didn't talk about the talk. They just sat and drank mate, in silence, like so many other times. That was their refuge. There were no important names, no shareholders, no press. Just a daughter and a mother who knew exactly how hard it had taken to get where they were. And that was enough. Over time, some media outlets attempted to remake the narrative. Headlines like, "The bride who ruined her wedding out of pride," or "The architect who destroyed a powerful family," circulated on certain websites, fueled by spokespeople close to the Delacroix family. But it no longer mattered. Monica didn't feel the need to clean up her image because she had nothing to hide. She let them speak. Those who really knew her knew what was behind it. Her story wasn't a soap opera, nor a revenge drama. It was a firm response to a long-standing chain of slights, a necessary break in order to live with integrity. Sometimes, the most revolutionary thing a woman can do is simply stop being silent. In every neighborhood where the Foundation opened a new branch, Monica insisted on placing a small plaque with a quote from her mother. "Being worthy doesn't cost money." It was her way of making it clear that everything she built was based on an unwavering value, one that neither power, titles, nor humiliation could erase. She was no longer concerned with social events, business alliances, or dinners with famous people. She had discovered that true legacy isn't measured in surnames, but in how many people you can touch without expecting anything in return. And that legacy, without a doubt, bore Pam's name. Years later, Monica received a formal invitation to attend a real estate awards ceremony. Ronald's name was among the former executives sanctioned for illicit practices. and Adam had ceased to appear in the industry after selling his shares and disappearing from the public eye. The firm Delacroix & Sons no longer existed as such. It had been absorbed, divided, and finally wiped from the market. She did not attend the gala, but sent a letter, which was read by a colleague on her behalf. In it, she thanked those who once slammed the door in my face, because without them, I would not have learned to forge my own path. Her remarks drew a standing ovation. Pam, sitting in her living room with the old television on, watched the broadcast and said nothing. She just nodded slowly, like someone acknowledging a just end without needing to explain. In that house where they had cried so many times in silence, peace now reigned. There was no longer any need to talk about overcoming difficulties or struggle, only about life. Because that was what they had achieved. Living truthfully, without pretending, without owing anyone apologies for being who they were. Monica arrived later that night, took off her shoes, and threw herself down on the couch next to her mother. There were no grand words, just a quiet, almost whispered phrase, "We did it, Mom." And yes, they had. As time passed, many young women who stopped by the foundation asked about Pam as if she were a mythical figure. Some believed her to be some kind of invented symbol, until they met her in person and discovered that woman with a soft voice, strong hands, and wise eyes. She didn't give speeches, but when she sat down with a girl to teach her how to keep a planner or how to treat a client with respect, she left a deeper impression than any university lecture. For Monica, seeing her mother there, passing on what she had learned through hardship and dignity, was more valuable than any degree or business achievement. Monica never fell in love the same way again, not because she closed herself off to love, but because she now loved from a different place. She had learned to recognize signs, to not tolerate the slightest gesture of contempt, to protect her space. Once, in a private conversation with a group of teenagers, one of them asked her if she regretted giving up a comfortable life. Monica smiled and replied, "I didn't give up a comfortable life. I gave up an elegant lie, and believe me, that's the most comfortable thing I've ever done." The girls laughed, but some immediately understood. Because sometimes, true luxury lies in being able to choose who you share your table, your time, and your story with. Over time, when people talked about that wedding scandal or the collapse of the Delacroix family, what was most striking wasn't the magnitude of the consequences, but the way Monica had acted. Without raising her voice, without seeking explicit revenge, without lowering herself to the level of those who had belittled her. The hardest part, however, hadn't been the media pressure or the subsequent legal proceedings. The hardest part had been looking at her mother that day, seeing in her eyes the silent pain of public humiliation, and standing firm so that she wouldn't have to bow her head. That was her greatest act of love and justice. Adam and his family disappeared from the corporate radar over time. No one knew exactly what became of them. But in every girl who came to the foundation feeling small, insecure, or ashamed of her origins, Monica found the strength to continue. It wasn't about changing the entire world, but about breaking that cycle in at least one life at a time. And if Pam could do it with so little, and if Monica had followed that path so clearly, then others could too. Because dignity, when planted in silence, blossoms without asking permission. And it is in that blossoming that true transformation begins.